So first of all, wow is what I wanted to say. So thank you very much indeed for inviting me to talk at this sustainability summit. And my wow comes from the fact that when we started the responsible project management movement, which is now 2017-18 we started, and in 2019 we won a couple of awards from UK PMI. I think it was 2019. One was the award for innovation, and the other was the award for social good or community benefit that we were doing. And I think those awards gave us the confidence to carry on. Empower. We felt empowered having had those awards, to really sort of press on forward. Because again, for those of you that were around then, you may remember that at that point, sustainability was very much an add-on or an afterthought. And many project managers we spoke to in those days said, well, that's not my job, that's the sustainability manager's job. But we argued right from the beginning that projects create the future. So project management is or needs to be at the epicenter of sustainability and sustainable development. So wow, now in 2025 we have a sustainability summit, which is just absolutely fantastic. There have been speakers from all around the world that I've been listening to, and I'm just delighted that we were inspired to continue making progress in this area. So what I'm going to talk about this evening, and thank you all for staying on so late, well, at least it's late here in the UK now, is our latest initiative, which really touches what a lot of people I've heard talking about today, which is the need to engage the younger generation. So I think I probably better start moving my slides forward so that I can, oh, and it's gone again. Hang on a minute. Right, I think I can now do it. There we are. So I want to talk about our latest publication that's freely available. I'll put the link in the chat later on. It's available under Creative Commons. Was released this year on International Project Management Day, the 6th of November. But this headline for this talk was Engaging Young People in Responsible Project Management. And what are my credentials for talking about that? Let's try and progress. Okay, so I'm going to begin with a little bit about me and a little bit of background to how this initiative came about. Then I shall talk about what we've been doing and the production of it, summarize with a few key takeaways, and then I believe we've got, hopefully have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So as Dana very kindly mentioned there, I've started my career as a practicing project person in the field of information systems and technology, then spent more than 25 years as an educator and a researcher. I'll unpack what I took away from those two big chunks of time in a moment, but I then moved towards the end of my period as an educator and a researcher within a UK university, with some colleagues, I co-founded the Responsible Project Management Movement. And just to underline, we never, it's not a money-making initiative. We always set it up as an initiative to try and help and support people wanting to act on sustainability. And COVID came along and I did carry on working for the university for a while, but after that I decided to dedicate some time to really pushing the RPM movement, which is still, what I do is done pro bono. I like to volunteer in lots of different ways, including being a fellow of the Schumacher Institute, which is a systems thinking think tank. Project Skills Alliance is all about creating a new project qualification in project skills. Notice the absence of the word management. I'm on the BSI committee for project management. I was on the PMI curriculum review committee, although that seems to have gone quite quiet recently, so I don't know whether that's still active or not. And then I have connections with several universities in the UK and the University of Jaffna in Sri Lanka. So just let me unpack those first two. So what I took away from my first sort of career in information systems and technology was that it didn't matter how fantastic the computer system we produced was, unless it was put into use and enabled some sort of transition to some better way of working, some better future, then we were probably wasting our time. Yes, I was involved in a few, well, one in particular project that the organisation I was working for was taken over, and that most of us working on it sort of knew it was a bit of a white elephant and it was a real shame, but that really underlined that belief. So that very much echoes what Phil Driver was talking about first thing this morning. And indeed, I've been collaborating with Phil over some pieces in our new work. So I've always been very wedded to that idea that projects weren't just about delivering what somebody said they wanted. And I also, I guess, because I was working in local government mostly in the UK, I had a brief period in financial services. I had an interest for projects for social good. Then my 25 years as an educator and a researcher, I suppose I reflected on how I had learnt getting to that point, and I realised it wasn't sitting in a lecture theatre listening to people. Yes, occasionally you used to have a really inspiring lecturer who could inspire you, motivate you, if you will. But the learning came from what people did. So I was felt very fortunate, and I still feel very fortunate to have been working in project management that at that time had very little sort of um, formality to it. I mean, not like accountancy or law, where you've got a lot of processes that, in order to get the education sort of accredited from the professional bodies, that wasn't so much of an issue. Project management is a relatively new profession, a branch of management, some would argue. So I was again that sort of gave grist to the mill, that the idea that I wanted to champion experiential learning, and getting professionals involved with students. And so I've always believed in hands-on, very practical work. I'd sort of throw projects in, throw students in at the deep end to undertake real projects and then reflect on their experience. And that's how I believed they would learn. And indeed, that was also rewarded by PMI, because I got a teaching award from them in 2019 as well. When I came to do my own research and had to deal with those tricky issues of sort of the approach to research and so forth, I very much felt that, well, what is a project? Is it the people working on it? Is it what we produce? Is it all the stakeholders? What is a project? And I settled in the end on the idea of an intersubjective phenomenon that existed in our communication networks, which might sound a bit of academic nonsense, which it probably is. But I still think we still, as an industry, grapple with that notion. We sort of built our industry on this idea of projects and project management, but what really are they? I think at its heart, project management is about storytelling. And again, I particularly dislike the words management and control, and I've been pleased to hear others saying that today. Given the state we are in now as a planet, I think the need to move away from that idea that we can control things, and if we just have the perfect plan, everything will be fine. If that was going to be true, we probably didn't need project managers to deliver projects. It's because things change all the time, and we're all people and we're doing projects for people. Everything is dynamic and fluid and moving all the time. Enter systems thinking, which of course, as a ITIS person, I was trained in systems thinking going right back to the 1980s. But now, if I had to articulate or pin down two things, one is that idea of storytelling and the other is the idea of systems thinking. I think those things underpin project management. So then we co-founded Responsible Project Management. Why responsible, not sustainable? Well, there were already some sustainability initiatives, which, I mean, sustainability in the business world have been around for quite a while, starting to creep into project management with things like green project management, and Gilbert Sylvius talking about a sustainability mind shift that was needed. But we wanted to build on the work that was starting to be done in the field of responsible management. So that was one of our cornerstones in starting. Another one, of course, was the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that were established in 2015. So timing-wise, that's what we were sort of dealing with. And I don't think in 2017, 19, I would have been confident to say it, but I think now, especially today with this fantastic summit underway, I firmly believe project management is the epicenter of sustainability. Projects create the future. So we absolutely have to recognise that we have a massive role in this. Yeah, I could talk for the whole session on that, so I'm not going to. I'm going to move on. But that's briefly a bit about me, what I took from all my previous experience that I really feel now I'm sort of synthesising into hopefully some resources that are helpful to people. So how we did it and why. So bottom right, you've got our latest publication, which is a companion guide to the excellent guide that I came across on systems thinking, A Young Person's Guide to Systems Change, which is published by the 50%, because half the world's population are under 30, and the 50% is part of the Club of Rome that targets working with young people, especially, I think, although I might be misrepresenting them here, but it really is global. Very much they have a strong presence in the global south, which, as any of us working in sustainability know, a lot of our issues come down to how can we engage the whole of the planet and all populations. But just jumping to the left-hand side of that slide, what we created in, I think it was 2018, was the Guide to Responsible Project Management that came out of a series of social learning workshops to which we had some fantastic contributors. And I must sort of, again, I don't think many of them are on here, but if anybody is and contributed to those, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to all the people that were involved in that initial piece of work. The Project Skills Alliance is starting to look at the crisis in education with so many young people in the UK, at least. I imagine this is probably across the developing world. They're facing two problems. One is the skills they need are changing very rapidly, and there is an argument to be made that the education system is really struggling to keep up with that. And also, many young people today are so worried about the state of the planet that they are unable to engage with the curriculum. That's what I started to hear through the Our Shared World group, who a lot of them are teachers working in higher education as well as schools. But that was what the crisis that we're sort of looking at specifically. And I suppose, yeah, there are lots of people doing lots of things, but again, progress is quite slow. So the other thing I'd come across was the Community Action Toolkit from the Schumacher Institute, that is a collection of, I think it's more than 100 tools for working with communities on climate action, which is great. And I suppose just another aside here, another reason why we didn't use the word sustainable when we created responsible project management was that, as several people have already mentioned in this today, people quite often saw that as just being about the planet, just being about environmentalism. And for years, it had sort of been dismissed because it was just seen as left wing, left field, not mainstream business, which was we lost a lot of years because of that. So we wanted to go with responsible. There is a lot of material out there for working with communities. Has been lots of great work in the UK from organisations such as Transition Towns, some of you may be familiar with. And the other thing we recognised with RPM was we saw not only that project management needed to become more responsible and sustainable, but also that sustainable development needs project management in order to accelerate its aims and goals. So there was a sort of a beneficial sort of relationship there that we wanted to really try and sort of bring to the foreground. So that's a bit about why, I suppose. Then I came across the Young Person's Guide to Systems Change that was published this year. Coincidentally, it's one of those happenstance, so many things came together at once. I'd wanted to create something for student or for young people for quite a long time for RPM. I found that guide to systems change for young people by the 50%. And then the gentleman shown there, Krushang Mystery, who I don't think he's on the call today, he reached out and said, could he do some volunteer work for RPM? I said, yes, great, I've got this idea. And working together, we created How to Get Things Done, which was, of all the titles we thought about, that was the only one that the young people we consulted actually they'd even look at. So it's not called Responsible Project Management for Young People or anything like that, although we have in the subtitle got Young Person's Toolkit for Responsible Project Management. And the other piece of the jigsaw was that we'd spent a number of years talking about responsible project management and mainly talking about the principles and the values. But what we were always being asked for was tools and techniques, which we'd sort of resisted because we do believe it is a mind shift that's needed. It's not just about the tools and techniques. They can't do the thinking for you. But I think the time is right now. And in fact, this year we've been running a program of workshops throughout the year, looking at the various tools and techniques that we can apply to responsible project management. Right, so that was how we did it and why. Just a quick snapshot, turning the first page from the cover there. So I say it's available freely under Creative Commons. It's a collaboration between Responsible Project Management, the 50%, and Portsmouth University. And then there you've got the chapters. So we sort of brainstormed, and again, very much lent towards the Young Person's Guide to Systems Change. We've adopted the same sort of language. It's written in the style of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so it's not written as an academic book. There's only a couple of references maybe in it, with lots and lots of pictures, illustrations. There's a worked example that runs all the way through, which interestingly, listening to ocean activism a little while ago, the example project that we actually take through is a beach cleanup. So I must share the resource that David and Mark and what they're doing there. And I was also interested on the panel just now to hear in southern Germany they were talking about projects with high school children. So I think hopefully there is an interest in trying to introduce young people to the basics of project management without scaring them off, I suppose, with all the technical. We very readily get involved in the technical language, the technical concepts, and well, we've created a whole profession that is that very technical discipline. So we've deliberately created this guide that is sort of a beginner's guide to, I haven't actually done a word check whether we've got the word management in there. I hope we haven't. But moving away from that idea of management and control to really bring systems thinking and storytelling to the forefront. That's runs throughout this. So I'll take you through. I've just got one slide for each of the chapters. So we've got effectively why responsible project management, what is a project, getting started. Then we throw in a chapter, how you might use AI to use systems thinking to help you get your project started. Some techniques further on that you probably will recognise: planning for action, bringing it home, celebrating success, and then summarising it all together. So without further delay, I will just take you through some of the slides, which really give you the headlines from each chapter. So why responsible project management? The Guide to Systems Change sort of took you through to the point where you've got a great idea to do something, which is why we've written this as a companion guide to that. So projects are everywhere. There are problems with the way humans try and manage projects. I'm sure we can all, again, talk for a long time about success and failure of projects. But in particular, responsible project management tries to start to tease out how you can work with natural and human systems to build a better future. So that's why this isn't project management, but responsible project management. So what is a project? Well, when we came across it, we absolutely loved the definition that Mark Enzer from Mott MacDonald offered up, which was a project is a set of interventions into pre-existing systems. Just let that sink in. So we often start projects with the mindset that we're there to deliver something, a solution. Whereas the world is functioning around whatever the situation is at the moment. So it might be quite a good idea to get a better understanding of that context. And we've heard a lot of talk about context on this call and how we need to do more than just deliver something. And if we're talking about responsible, then that purpose needs to, somewhere in it, have the notion that we're trying to enable a better future. And for the word flourishing often crops up in that. So within the Guide to Systems Change, they look at the anatomy of a system and refer to purpose, elements, and interactions. So we took the view that projects are a special type of system. They are a system, but a project is a system, so purpose, elements, interactions, plus limits and plus risks. Lots of the definitions I could be quite critical of projects and project management. But I felt we were trying to avoid labouring those words too much. And we introduce a couple of examples. One is the idea of young people creating a video about something, and the other is the beach cleanup. And we take the beach cleanup one through all of the techniques that we use and would provide examples of that. And then central to this idea is that projects leave footprints. Whether we recognise it or not, or whether we look back at the footprints or not, they are there. Every project, the moment you start intervening in systems, you're leaving some sort of legacy, some sort of effect. It might only be in the way people think about things if you start and then stop a project, but there are those footprints are there, and we need to pay a little bit more attention to those. So getting started, we have a brief discussion, but what does success look like, or what might it look like? Essentially to draw out the idea that everybody will have a different view, and we don't answer that question in any way that people might be hoping for. Many researchers over many decades have spent a lot of time chasing that, and there are people that collect examples of failed projects and learn from those, which is great. But as we know, every project is different, so it's very difficult to pin that down. And then we move into the idea of using AI, which is making sense of your project one picture at a time. And you can use AI to help you with that. But we don't suggest starting with that. We suggest doing some initial brainstorming or getting an initial map of the context down. So there's a little quote there just from the Guide to Systems Change, which is about communities and reiterating that fact that it's about people, and the only way to understand them is to listen to the people who live in it, work in it, and that takes time. As project managers, we're very action orientated. Certainly I know I am very keen to get started, but actually one of the things we need to do, and we heard about this from David and Mark just now, talking about the whole sort of shift to create their, what did they call it? Ocean activism, where that came from. That was a great example of actually having to find out more about the systems, the existing systems, before you try and introduce or undertake a project. Okay, so I'm sure this could have been a very, very big chapter if we'd wanted to, but, and this is just one of two references, as I say, 5 lenses that we took from systems thinking to suggest that somebody starting a project might want to draw some pictures from that perspective. And this is where we can use AI to help, and we actually include some suggested prompts in the book. And then at the bottom there, I do include a sort of a health warning about AI. and the fact that, I mean, there was, again, a bit of discussion on an earlier session about the sort of limits and challenges of using AI. The idea that I quite like, that I've heard recently that I think is quite useful, is, we hear a lot of people complaining, oh, well, AI hallucinates, or AI produces things that aren't true. Yes, but that's a bit like saying, well, a book of fiction isn't true, but is it false? It's a story. So I think if we can shift our mindset and start recognizing, I mean, AI, of course, can do pattern matching on a scale far beyond the possibility of any one human or even group of humans being able to. How can we harness that in a way that enables us to make better decisions? But it's not about saying, is it true or false? It's about, okay, well, it's a work of fiction because it's just a statistical analysis of the data it's looked at. But how can there's still scope for that to help us improve our decision making in projects. So there's a whole chapter on that. Planning for action. I love Phil Driver's work. He was talking about it this morning. So if you missed that, I think the video will be available. You can catch up with that. But it's this idea, and we've talked about this in standards a lot. It's this idea that we tend with projects to sort of produce something, throw it over the fence, as one of my colleagues' metaphor, throw it over the fence and then sort of get on with the next project. And this has been emphasized throughout the day today. We need to think about the results of our projects enable use, and it's only through that use that benefits are realized. So making those connections is really, really important. And I've got to say the beach clean example is fleshed out in the guide, in the toolkit. Work breakdown structure, I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. We'd say a little bit about estimating, network diagrams, Gantt chart, and then what could go wrong or better than expected. I used to have a reputation as a practitioner from being able to create a success from a disaster, or from an imminent disaster, and snatch success from the jaws of failure, I think people used to say. Because, and some people I know in your language, risks would mean risks and opportunities. But the boundary that we draw around projects does tend to lead us to wanting to resist change. And I've always felt if the world is changing while we're doing our project, we should have an open door and be looking for opportunities to actually maybe even produce an even better result. I mean, who knows? But actually keeping that door open is a difficult balancing act. I won't dispute that for one moment. And then we should actually be able to respond and adapt when things change, and have adaptation plans that we put in place for perhaps some key things right at the beginning. And the little music notes there are just to remind me that we talk about making our plans sing. We've got to bring it to life, and that doesn't necessarily mean just sort of expecting things to go as planned. Things will change. So there's a planning for action chapter. And then these are just the extracts from the toolkit. So we've got a perspectives map there that some of you may have come across. The idea I first saw presented in a diagrammatic form like that was in and I haven't got this reference actually, but not here anyway, it was the Civil Service Guide to Systems Thinking, which is mainly targeting strategy and policy work, but I think it applies equally well to helping us understand different perspectives on projects. From that, we can then develop the PRUB connections. So that's the top right-hand side. From that, we can then, or what I've done here is take each of the projects, so the 6 projects on the left-hand side, then get taken into the work breakdown structure to illustrate what a work breakdown structure might look like. So each of those columns represents one of those projects. And then finally, you've got an example there of a network diagram, because I used to spend a long time helping students get their head around this. So I hope this is a fairly simple example that may help a few people. And of course, we all know you can do a fairly simple project without drawing one of these, or you can get software to draw it for you. My experience of drawing using some of the software packages was they could never schedule a project as tightly as I could, but that's perhaps because I'm an optimist. And I haven't included the example of the Gantt chart because I'm sure everybody here knows what a Gantt chart looks like. So we then got a chapter on bringing it home, which is essentially all about communication and just reiterating that message that projects thrive on stories and relationships. And those are what change as the project's going on. And you need to take a much more active role in managing that. Well, no, not managing, listening to that as the project unfolds. I can remember a leading figure in the project management field presented online actually at one of our social learning workshops and talked a lot about HS2 and about, which for those that aren't in the UK is a big infrastructure project that has been delayed and budgets have gone through the roof, because nobody was really managing the story. That's what he was talking about. So, and then celebrate success. I think there's always, again, a success to snatch from the jaws of defeat. Doesn't have to be about meeting cost time quality. It might be about the learning. It might be that a community has learnt something about the sort of future they want. And then again, I know we've heard this in the last presentation, the ripple effects. There will be ripple effects, and you need to think about tying up some loose ends maybe, but also how can those ripple effects be used? Because we've really got to transition to a much better, probably radically different future. So I think ripple effects will become increasingly important. We summarise by putting all the tools in a toolbox, and then we have a very short chapter at the end on what next. So RPM started as a call to action. Oh, sorry, excuse me. A call to action, as indeed I think we've got that coming up here. I do believe and still believe that acting on sustainability is a call to action for project people. It's not about doing more. I think it's about doing things differently. One of the things, for example, in our other work has been to convert that linear process, because we talk to many people about project management and they immediately think of a linear process, sometimes in sustainability circles, even to the extent of not wanting to even consider the possibility of project management any further, because typically a project is defined as having a start and having an end. Clearly it's not meant to be sustainable. So there is a call to action to do things differently in our work, but without making the burden intolerable for project people. We have a community that we've established that is international. We've got ambassadors all over the world. We run a regular cafe on the first Monday of the month because, as I say, we set out with the aim of supporting people looking to take more responsible, sustainable actions on their projects, possibly where they're the only sustainable voice in the organisation. That's changed, obviously, over the last 7 or so years. There are a lot more people aware of this now. And we also believe it's important to provide opportunities for sharing success stories or stories of projects that are trying to change things, because it is going to be a difficult journey. We are facing a difficult journey as humanity, but project managers have a really important role to play in that. So key takeaways are what we do. So the RPM movement still hosts our regular monthly cafe. We've been running workshops this year, and we develop educational resources. In fact, next week we've got a meeting to talk about what other resources might be needed to help educators use this toolkit in their work, perhaps with people who perhaps aren't necessarily on a very academic route, but are maybe apprentices or maybe children in schools. What can be done? Our resources are all free to download and to share. You can join the cafe, join the workshops and spread the word. What do we still need to take care of? Not necessarily RPM, but in general, I think project management still needs to work on that intersection between strategy and action. I know Phil talks a lot about this, and I think this is where his work can be really, really useful. Turning vision into reality. I think everything we do with all this in mind has to come from that idea of a vision of a better future. And we're going to have to be bold. We're going to have to take some bold steps in the years to come. And we need to develop our mindset and capabilities to do that. I think that is almost me done. Links and connections on the left there. Just a reminder of the connections there in the middle. PDUs, I gather, they're still lagging behind, and we haven't got those yet, but I think Merv's got that in hand. So thank you very much indeed for listening. That's my last slide. I've got a feeling. Oh, and there's my references and sources, of course. So I'm going to. What shall I do? Shall I stop sharing now?
Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you for sharing. Well, we're going to jump now into a Q&A session. So please feel free. We want to hear of your thoughts. So drop the questions in the Q&A tab that you can see up top. We're going to wait a few seconds so you guys have time as well to do so. While you're doing this, I am going to post in a minute as well the link to what will be the form, the feedback form that we would like to hear more from you guys, honestly. And so hear about the experience throughout the event. But it is true as well, and it has been announced that we're having some problems with the PDUs. So I'm going to pop up in a minute as well the email that you can connect with, so we can send you those to you. And so, yeah, we're going to wait a little bit more. Thank you so much, Dr. Karen, for your talk. It has been very, very insightful. I was wondering, as you were talking, and as well knowing a little bit of the work that Phil Driver does, if obviously we need to put the customer, we need to put the user at the center, right? Look at the benefits we were saying. I do realize that there's a lot of changes that are coming with AI as well. And seeing that your book and the project as well involves AI, I was thinking, how do you see AI shaping the way that young people are approaching the project management and these kind of projects in the next decade?
Well, I'm not been studying AI as such. I've sort of come across it, as you almost can't escape now. I think it is inevitable. I think the biggest challenge facing educators is how, on the one hand, do we educate young people to use AI, I suppose, responsibly? Because clearly it can do pattern matching on a scale that we can't even begin to imagine. But I'm concerned because a lot of I've seen lots of examples where people can see that something's been, or work out that something's been created by AI or has got certain limitations as a result of their experience.
Yeah.
So I think the big challenge going forward is how we can interact with AI in ways that ensure that, it's the ethics and value question. How do we ensure those are imported into that discussion and that viewing it? I think it's going to be really difficult. I say my career has been in technology, and what I've seen technology always do is amplify and accelerate what is already there. Working in an IT department, we used to have people come and say, "Oh, well, I need a new computer system for X." Quite often, when you looked at it, it wasn't a new computer system they needed. They needed to look at roles and responsibilities, or what the service was they were trying to provide, or so on and so on. And if you throw technology at a problem, you can actually make the problem worse because you're doing things faster and more efficiently. So I think we are at a bit of a crossroads at the minute in terms of learning how to work with AI collaboratively in a way that doesn't disconnect us from our experience and our wisdom. So it's how can we together create wisdom? I think for young people, when they haven't got that life experience and that wisdom, that's going to be incredibly difficult. So for me, that is probably one of the research areas I'm most interested in looking at. As you'll see, I've got sort of a foot in three camps: sustainability and systems thinking, project management, and then education. And I do think that you're absolutely right to raise the question. I don't have any great answers, but I'm hoping in a little while we will start to develop. And I can't imagine it will be a one-size-fits-all for one moment. I say we put some prompts into the toolkit that I'm hoping people will be able to try out. I think one of the key things takeaway I've come talking about talking to everybody who's using it, you can't just go in and ask AI a question and expect it to do something to help you, a bit like you do with Google. And I know people who have developed relationships, and I know this sounds a bit weird, but developed relationships with their AIs because they have worked together, but they have recognized the limits. Because essentially, AI is taking a qualitative issue or qualitative question, dealing with it quantitatively, and in other words, in numbers, and then giving you back a qualitative answer. So, of course, that needs wisdom to interpret.
Yeah. And so, well, my last question before we go, we have here for somebody said, you have mentioned that HS2 project is delayed and budget is overhauted. Any projects overrun will have automatically cost overrun. Can you give your perspective how it could have delayed better? Let me just put that in here so you can see it as well. There you go.
Any project overrun will ultimately have cost overrun. Well, first of all, actually, I think the assertion that any project overrun will automatically have cost overrun isn't valid. I can remember, and again, this is going back a very long time, a certain building society in the UK published a report. They'd analysed their own projects, and they had discovered in many cases where if the project had just been delayed a little bit, in other words, they hadn't rushed to pile in lots of extra resource to finish it on time, it would actually have cost less. So I would refute that assertion. Can you give your perspective on how it could have dealt better? I think that that just taking a step back, and for me, it nearly always comes back to purpose. We had an excellent example. Sorry, that door opening was just the cat joining me. We had an excellent example earlier about the way people had pivoted. That's the challenge for project managers. We get very attached to our projects and we don't want to let them, let them go. Sometimes we don't even want to stop them when they should be stopped. So again, I'm not sure that's quite the answer that project people would like, but my 48 years experience does tell me that quite often from a sustainability perspective, there are many projects we should stop because, again, and it's been said, if we carry on automating and making even more efficient business as usual, that's destroying the planet. So there are some very difficult questions coming up. Vested interests, we've got to uncover hidden vested interests. I guess if I had to give one short answer to that question, it would be uncover the vested interests and try and make people feel psychologically safe. Because quite often when things are going wrong, all the project people, all the team they know what's happening, but they don't have a voice. So give them a voice and try and uncover where there are vested interests. Where's the money coming from? Who benefits? But yeah, again, probably not a comfortable answer for people.
All right. Well, I think that's our time up. So thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your expertise and inspiring us to think different about how we empower the next generation. For those listening, and before we wrap up, a quick reminder, if you like to make a difference and get involved, volunteering with us is a possibility. So as well, email us. You have the email over the chat. And let's jump now into networking. We're going to have our next session at 6:10. And so, yeah, we will see you over there. Remember, you have a tool that it's brilliant, which is Ring Central, that allows you to connect with other people, to be able to do video calls as well as chatting with them. So go on and jump into the People tab and look into who is connecting so you can connect as well with them. We'll see you then at 6:10.
Thank you, Dana. And can I just I can see at least 3 RPM ambassadors in the audience. So thank you for joining, Franco, Nick, and Shai.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. We'll see you later. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Have a good night.